but to go and pretend to be a cooker at Parliament House. This is my jam. This is my little sweet get up here. Reckon I fit right, fucking you, don't you? How do you like my fucking rank hair coming out the sides? You bloody beauty. Ready for fucking freedom.
Yeah, so as you can see, I went to Canberra for the continuation, the planned budget day continuation of the Convoy to Canberra series of events. I thought I was going to have a grand old time cosplaying as a freedom fighter. You know, it wasn't infiltration, it was just cosplay. To be honest, I've kind of been dreaming, and if you listen to my videos continuously, then you would have heard me say this a lot. There's part of me, this like childish, untamed, dumb precinct of my soul that wishes it could be, you know, screaming freedom next to a bunch of cookers. And I've been dreaming of that since like early 2020, okay? So surely it's my right to, at some point before this movement is done, and that moment seems to be arriving, you know, that I can do that at least once, you know, let a gal dream. I mean, to me, it's all such politically ambiguous, dumb posturing shit that anyone should be able to do it at least once, right? You know? It's not like they've achieved anything, is it? So it's just a fun day out, right? Wasn't a fun day out. It was not. It was actually a very low energy day, and I had a very boring time being at the rally. And that got me thinking about what I should really be documenting in Canberra. You know, should one really waste one's time just cosplaying as a freedom fighter? Or would my time be better spent speaking to the various locals who've had to deal with all these cookers as they flooded into Canberra? So that's what I did. I went and I hit up Leah House and Roxley Foley. Leah is an Aboriginal activist who was helping to set up the embassy space anyway, ahead of its 50th anniversary celebrations earlier this year. Roxley was a Gumanga activist and was also a custodian at the embassy space around 5 or so years back. One thing I've really admired about the online social media feeds of both Roxley and Leah is how they've both really come to educate people around them on the nuances and the details of the Conspiracist movement. And that's not easy. It doesn't just require you looking online and laughing at cookers, as they well know. It requires you to actually have a bit of a steep learning curve yourself and learn all about the political opponent that suddenly appeared before you. So I admire the way that they've gone to lengths to do that and then educate everyone around them. One of the reasons that I did want to go on to the peer review was because you've both picked up that learning so well. Like, I now learn from the peer review about what's going on here in Canberra. So your learning curve has been really steep, but you've really engaged in these pests that have just shown up at your door.
So many people have reached out and said like they're so thankful for this content because unfortunately we don't have many people making content in Canberra that are on the ground dealing with them.
That's true.
And Roxy's been doing stuff as well. So yeah, but no, the positive feedback outweighs the negative because I have had like a sprinkling of cookers in my inbox.
Oh, I imagine
talking absolute nonsense. But
educating you.
It completely like the good stuff outweighs the bad stuff. 100%.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it's all that same feedback, just we would have had no idea from this angle because a lot of people thought this was Aboriginal people leading this movement. And from very early on, we were trying very hard to debunk that this Camp Makara, there's a handful of black people in this movement. The majority of them were white people. It's 95% white people down in this camp. And if you were only following their social media, you would have thought it was a black camp.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, that was the reason I was really driven to put content out to actually say, well, no, because if you're following their social media, you think that, I can see how it appears that way.
Yeah.
but it's not. And believe me, because I'm on the ground watching them from the embassy, they're 20 meters away.
Yeah.
It's white people.
100%. The events around the embassy, as cookers started to flood into the areas just around the embassy and Old Parliament House as December advanced, started to capture both of their attentions. Leah, you were working at the embassy or working with the embassy in the lead up to the anniversary when suddenly people started showing up.
Yeah, well, we started preparing for the 50th anniversary, like years. Literally, it goes back a couple of years now.
Okay, yeah.
And we're building that up like around June, July last year.
Yeah.
Just building the capacity of all the people putting their hands up to say they want to like support, get whatever groundwork needs to be done. Then this came just out of left field, like nobody saw this coming. They originally set up, I think, around the 14th or 15th of December in Canberra at the Tent Embassy. So originally they were completely fine to come in, use the space how they needed to use it to do their protesting. So that was Bruce Shillingsworth Senior, and I'm not sure if Junior was there. They popped on my radar because they were circulating a thing on Facebook around sovereignty and divine sovereignty, and straight away it was like red flags for me.
Yeah.
And they were circulating some content in mid-December trying to encourage people to come down to the Tent Embassy to learn about sovereignty, divine sovereignty, and to like understand your spiritual connection to your sovereignty. It was kind of, for me, the red flag immediately was the language they were using.
Yeah.
And I recognized it straight away and was like, this is not interested. So I didn't go down originally.
Yeah.
I stayed away from it. And it was a very fast decline to the end of December where we saw the fire at Old Parliament House. So it literally, those couple of weeks, mid-December to the end of December, was just them trying to gather people to come.
I'd had my eye on this guy called Michael Sims, very prominent in the anti-vax networks, because about a year prior, he'd made his way through the embassy and having given warnings to the current caretakers at the time, these guys were kind of a bit no good and be a bit wary, falling on a bit of deaf ears. They ended up broadcasting off the floor courts of the embassy for a couple of weeks. So there was this initial red flag engagement, and when I saw them back engaging with this Muckader camp in December and their socials being more active. And
for all that, though, what I think really activated a sense of urgency among people who'd had relationships or had had custodianships, past or present, at the embassy space was the fire at Old Parliament House.
Then we got suddenly a fire and Parliament went up, and that was incredibly disturbing, but also a bit of laughing, well, we kind of told you so.
Yeah.
But incredibly alarming knowing the driving forces that were sort of connected to this, that this might not be just an expression of black anger.
Yeah.
That there's definitely something more seedy. But it wasn't until, the locals were getting up to their neck in just all the disrespect and all the crazy, and started calling in all the old hands and networks of the space. We sort of came back.
Well, before the fire, I didn't recognize it as an issue. Like, I just thought they were just cookers and they'll clear out eventually, because I recognized that non-Indigenous people kind of convening the conversation, which was Dylan Wilson. That was like just a massive red flag. But that fire was when we all kind of were like, okay, we can't ignore this. Like, we didn't take it seriously.
They did try to be conciliatory with these people, but after a time, things began to get violent.
There was threats made in end of December, early January towards my uncles and cousins, so traditional custodians in the area, that were trying to meet with them and get some clarity around what it is they want from what they're doing. And does it align with the Tent Embassy and what the Tent Embassy represents? And if it doesn't, maybe it's time to part ways, because we've accommodated, the embassy has accommodated to you guys. It's been very generous to you. But now you're kind of you've crossed the line. and we need to make it clear that the embassy is not going to be held responsible for your behaviour. And then early January was when they threatened me at the fire and my auntie and a couple of other men.
You will be dealt with.
We ain't got to engage with you.
If you say it to the wrong person, you know what's going to happen.
That's weird for the...
That was Bruce Shillingsworth threatening to deal with my auntie and I and one of my cousins, Narlin, saying that they were going to deal with us tribal ways and that we were going to be dealt with and that we were going to be taken. So in that interaction, they said it several times.
Taken?
Yes. And then as they were leaving, as they were walking away, they were yelling at us while walking away that we were going to be taken.
As someone who's not from Canberra, and I'd not spent any significant time at all at Canberra before this trip, so I was shocked to realise upon heading to this space just how close all of these areas are. This shit is happening mere metres from the embassy. I mean, if you're standing out in front of the embassy, you can see the old Parliament House right in front of you. So I was fortunate to actually be able to go to the Aboriginal Tent Embassy and have a chat on the embassy space with Gwenda Stanley, who's a Gomeroi activist and educator.
Gwenda, thanks for so much for having us on the embassy space.
Oh, welcome to the Aboriginal Tent Embassy, brother. All the best.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So
finally.
grateful.
Gwenda knows all about the shit that the convoy to Canberra brought to the embassy space, because after that fire, she came straight down and immediately went to deal with it herself.
We were coming down anyway. We had a 50th organised.
Yeah.
What people got to understand is that there was 12 months of consultations. The families, including those of Isabel Coe and Billy Craig's children, Annie Jenny Munro, and a lot of the other families, including Lyle Swan, Alison Urlan, and the elders from here, and the families that have maintained this embassy since 1992.
Yeah.
Because what people don't realise is that the embassy was resurrected in 1992. From the takeover, when such children like Murray, Nyoka and Willie and the rest of Annie Jenny Munro's children, and even Billy T was a teenager at that time, when they took it over. And the embassy has been going since 1992, continuously. We're oblivious to that this camp was over here, because we'll get messages, what's happening at the embassy, nothing, we never heard from anyone. And then all of a sudden we were watching it, and then, they were doing all these little rituals and whatever else, and we thought, okay then. And then we were going to come down at Christmas and come down and start all the work and get them prepared for the 50th, and so we just waited off, and then the next minute we seen the fire, and it's like, what the fuck happened?
His presence on the space forced people into action over the course of late December right through to February, really, with white cookers combined with a few Indigenous figureheads in the Sovsit space trying to invade the embassy space for their own ends.
So me and my nephew started making our rounds down that way, come across all the same little cooked Fruit Loops I seen on the video, didn't I? So I was like, you can F off, you can fuck off, and you can all fuck off, get the fuck off here.
Yeah.
And then, we had the big chief come at me, with his little allodial titles and his stamp, and it's like, well, they mean shit here, mate, and you stamp, you can stamp it on your forehead and run around with it, who cares?
Yeah.
And then I had that big river lad run at me with a bundi, and I'm like, are you for real, mate? You're going to run at me with that? Then he spots me nephew, didn't he? So then he backpedaled. What people don't realise, besides the attacks of the non-Indigenous neo-Nazi, white colonial boys, whatever, honky-tonks, whatever they want to call themselves, we're also getting attacked by our own mob. And that includes groups from the OSTF, Sovereign Union, and other groups that were sent in to infiltrate.
Yeah.
We're attacked, Murray was actually burned out of a caravan. They tried to set the caravan on fire while he was asleep in a caravan.
When was that?
This would have been probably just the week before 2 weeks before the 50th. So from the second week onwards, 3 weeks we've had to deal with people attacking us, abusing us, and coming into this camp. We've had a woman drive through this camp, trying to run us over. She also tried to run over the police officers are up here. So there was a lot of abuse and attacks from our own mob, who were mentally ill as well. They need help. I love my mob, but I'm not here to fight my mob. We're all supposedly fighting for the same cause. And unfortunately, what's happened is that the embassy has always been a part, this main political portal, because this is the only place you're allowed to camp here. So I think people try to take ownership of it. But without the responsibility.
Yeah.
And that was an insult to the legacy that's been bestowed. That was started, from our family.
A lot of this came to a head in late January And at that point, people in the embassy space found themselves having to literally form physical barriers to keep people out.
And on such short notice, the NCA, the National Capital Authority, left us hanging with no fencing. So we originally tried teeing up fencing from NCA to keep the area safe, so we didn't have to worry about them coming in.
Yeah.
But NCA didn't do that, last minute, so it just meant a handful of us had to be down on the ground patrolling the line. And we were carrying bundis, like we were just walking around with bundis, just patrolling. You see how tall I am, just walking around with this wooden stick. And every time I was...
It was mainly senior women, like old
Yeah, it was a lot of
aunties
women
from
doing
Queensland,
Wow.
just going nut.
Roxley Foley, and I love what he did here, even set up a Stephen Crowder style table just to keep the cookers occupied and engaged and have some kind of a discussion with them. And I just think it's fucking brilliant because it also stopped them from taking a more physical approach.
I went to sit up there and give them a bit of
Free
shady education.
Yeah.
And also a bit of a focal point, because we had 6-7 people trying to hold a line of the entire space and just wave people on with a bundi, or we might have had a pit bull or two, but it was horrific. Like the wave of flags, the mass rabid excitement and entitlement.
Every time I came back from patrolling one side, I would come back up to the steps, and Roxy was still up there communicating, having this dialogue with them respectfully. He did amazing. Like I would stand there for like a minute.
Respectful.
It was
You're
amazing.
trying your best
he was
anyway.
Trying,
Yeah.
and he was doing better than I could have done, which is why I was walking around with a stick, ready to fight people. But every time I went over there, I would stand for like a minute or two, and I was listening to a lot of them just weren't getting it. Like they were trying to educate Roxley.
I were there
and
to
he would
educate you.
completely
Thank you.
giving it back to them, like completely debunking everything they threw at him. He's like just a fountain of knowledge. It was incredible watching him just debunk everything that got thrown at him. And he was just doing that for, I don't even know, like he didn't even get allocated that job. He just sat up there and randomly started doing it.
One thing had been playing on my mind, and I asked Leah and Roxley, were these white initiations I'd heard about real? And these were rumours I'd heard about in which Indigenous conspiracists in the space were basically inducting white cookers.
They race shifted. They initiated a white dog, a little bull terrier, a white bull terrier called Wilma. She's on Instagram.
So Wilma's now transracial, the first
Wilma,
transracial
the little
dog.
white bull terrier, is black now.
And when it comes to culture and things, there is no go-to or default. All mob have the right to create culture and ceremony and take anything they want in any way they choose. It's their license to then write a culture. But don't ship that shit as some sacred fucking ceremony when you're trying to like basically milk a bunch of like hippies for some anti-vax, get out of mandate law.
Yep.
Monopoly card.
But the Canberran response to the cookers didn't just begin and end with the embassy. As anybody who saw a viral video from the Convoy period of one legend of a resident running her car into or kind of over an anti-vaxxer's car would know, all locals were getting a little bit sick of these people flooding into town. One thing that I think's been of interest has been the appearance of several anti-cooker live streamers going into Convoy spaces to engage or even counter them. So I went and I spoke to a couple of those streamers or presences, their self-styled Captain Canberra and the Queen of Canberra.
Figured if America's got Captain America, then Canberra can have Captain Canberra. And it sort of
Why not?
popped into my head of just being a kind of semi-trashy trolling superhero. I am very recognisable, but going down there and not being myself, being someone entirely different for entirely different reasons, has thrown them off completely.
The Queen first told me that she became engaged with what was going on with the anti-lockdown movement in Canberra via the Twitch space. And indeed, I myself had first noticed that space back in, I think, October or November, when Twitch community started ruining anti-lockdown Telegram channel voice chats by raiding them, which ahead of certain rallies I found to be pretty entertaining and legitimately useful to us.
It's way easier to watch this sort of crazy cooked content when you've got people to commiserate with and be dumbfounded with and rage with.
But, of course, the cookers were only down the road from these people, not just online. So these guys took the next step from online into real life.
One day while watching the streams, Peter Little was on and instantly recognised the location in the background and realised it was the Yarralumley Yacht Club. Threw on some clothes, jumped in my car, didn't exactly know what my tactic was going to be. I went out there, realised he's a guy who needs help, not to be made fun of or messed with, and sort of presented myself as someone from the other side, but friendly in a way.
Yeah.
I have been angry at this movement for a long time. I still am very, very angry at it. But realising that he's somebody in a cult that needs help, not cook a celebrity status or whatever that amounts to, made me approach things differently and realise that they are just people. A lot of them really need help because they're in a movement where they've got a sunk cost fallacy into the conspiratorial makeup of it all. And with the Queen of Canberra's help, we started approaching these people on the ground at their Saturday rallies, documenting it for people on Twitch, as well as meeting with these people, telling them very openly that we're from the other side, we are counter-protesters, using that language specifically, but that we're not there to intimidate them, antagonise them. And for me, it was reminding them that, as different as our beliefs are, I still view them as equals.
I think that was also a pretty big defining point in the change of how Canberra started reacting, definitely in virtual spaces.
Yeah.
Because all these freedom protesters would just invade these chat rooms and community notice boards. Anyone, anytime, spoke up about these crazies doing something, they flooded in the thousands and started really full on.
Yeah.
If you thought they were full on in the streets, to see them zero in, and that's been a reason a lot of people have been afraid speaking up.
They still haven't quite cottoned on to the idea of a counter-protest, and so at our little counter-protest meetup, we made a big sign saying, "This is a counter-protest, can you handle it?" They still thinking that our approach is very hypocritical. What? Protesting a protest?
They don't understand.
Or protesting against freedom.
Yeah.
Or protesting against First Nations people, which is the particularly disgusting one.
Just the idea that we would challenge them means we're not respecting their free speech, and they have such tunnel vision on this that they only think about their own freedom of speech.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't care about us. They can't even grasp the concept that we have a right to freedom of speech too.
I did get a really naff feeling standing around this space, I must say. What was happening there was not in any way a protest. I saw 4 stands around which was staffed by fundamentalist Christians offering up free books on kind of Christian but really Satan themed and Conspiracist and so on. You could take as many of them as you liked. I wanted to ask about the money side, but I was too busy cosplaying, so I was just grateful to them.
Yeah! Yay! Too right. Freedom.
People are very much just kind of happy to be there. I've said this before in my videos about the anti-lockdown movement and more generally about conspiracy spaces. There's a massive happy to be there vibe that I've always remarked upon as being typical of these spaces, and it's not so much like real activist or political spaces. You don't get that so much when you're really angry about something a bit more tangible. But I also wondered if this low energy, just happy to be there vibe was happening because maybe I was a bit late. Maybe it was all running out of puff. Just as it did for the embassy space, things began to turn physical for some people in the live streaming space, populated by people like Captain Canberra and the Queen of Canberra. So the Queen of Canberra was attacked by a group of cookers for the crime of trying to stop them from setting up more of their stupid camps.
It's like they're not even protesting mandates, they're not even protesting any of this sovereign citizen bullshit. They're protesting not being able to park their cars wherever the hell they want. And it was around the end, when school gets out, and convoy of like 10 cars just drove up the footpath, down the footpath for a block, driving quite fast. They have no reason to be driving on a footpath. And I got incensed. I saw that their next location was the ABC, so I went down there and I sat on the grass up the front of the ABC Canberra. And sure enough, they started driving up onto the curb, onto the lawn. And I tried to stop a few cars. I didn't expect to succeed, but I just needed to be physical presence pushing back against them. That's not the police. So I just got in front of some cars and I'd stop.
And Captain Canberra was caught up in the crossfire of some damage done to an anti-lockdown live streamer's car. And he wound up, would you believe, in a car chase.
I went to the car park behind the National Archives where a bunch of them are sleeping in trucks and vans and stuff. And I simply did to them what they've been doing to us for months, and I held down my horn for about a minute. And this guy jumped in his car straight away.
Because he assumed it must have been you that had done
Yeah,
these things. You were the only person to blame in the area.
Yeah, we're the only two recognisable people from the other side. So of course we copped the blame. And he tried to cause an accident with my car. He chased us, drove in the other lane down the Old Parliament House, tried to block off the road.
It was a bit of a Mexican standoff for a bit.
Yeah.
And so I think after this escalation, we can probably all empathise with a little bit of a transition into the more yard-style tactics, which is exactly what Captain Canberra went on to do.
I think it was probably about a week ago that they were assembling down at the Governor-General's house. They were having their 2 minutes of silence because they fetishised the military and sacrifice and all that jazz. I simply drove down there in my car, held a megaphone out the window while there's a bunch of them live streaming, and just yelled obscenities and profanities at them in a really bloody loud voice.
Now, I do want to make an observation here. The space that has developed for watching cookers is quite often, it seems to me, an apolitical one. People, in my experience, without a constructive left political framework guiding their response to fringe far-right movements, can sometimes tend into being a bit gratuitous. And I've seen things from this Twitch space that really leave me fucking cold. I've seen someone ask a foreign live streamer, as in, not Australian by birth and with a foreign accent, about their visa status. And I kind of thought, what the fuck is this? Is it Reclaim Australia? I've seen the space embrace a homophobe who was not just any homophobe, a leading figure in the anti-same-sex marriage campaign. And I know that we should let the reformed back into the fold, and I do agree with that. But I don't think this person's reformed at all. I just think they happen to not mind vaccines. And yay for them, but I do mind homophobes, and so should you. I think that when very online people crave more trolling content without having any real activist or left productive concerns, again, some pretty gratuitous shit can occur. And invariably, it's the activists who do materialise who have to suffer the consequences of that shit. We should target the big dogs of a movement, not the cooked people on the ground. And we should have a political worldview of our own. Something that goes a little bit beyond, look at the funny kooks. I mean, they are funny, but you see where I'm coming from.
And I think it's really important too to establish the cooked from the cookers. There are conspirators among Cecil and conmen, and when we had to kind of pull the wool away from that black shield, it was And we had to target people in ways that haven't been done before, and it's not generally enough these arguments we don't pull out into black space.
Leah also cracked into the online space by having Instagram live conversations with leading conspiracists. And they were some really brilliant Instagram live conversations in which she really got to the point of the matter.
Both of them, I only jumped in because it was meant to be Lorna Munro. They were getting Lorna Munro on there, and Lorna's internet wasn't working, so I jumped on just to call them out, just say, like, stop your shit. I would love to do that again, but with a little bit more structure and to really debunk what they were saying, because I was so tired. We had been at the embassy for days on end dealing with them. We were all exhausted. That was the night that they got moved along, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay.
We were exhausted.
It was towards the tail end.
We were exhausted. And I was just like fed up. I had no energy or patience for them, and I kind of rambled a bit. I'd love to do it again properly.
You did a very, very fucking good job.
If you're so passionate about Aboriginal rights, then when you were at your little campaign the other day in front of the High Courts and you were jumping up and down about saving our children from the vaccine, then where's the same energy in saving our children from incarcerations? Because we got 10-year-olds sitting in custody right now, okay?
Well, that's
where's
what we want to stop, sis.
No, listen to me. Where's that same passion for our fucking babies being removed? Where's the same passion for our women with the medical neglect happening? Where's that same passion for the lack of education? Where's that same passion for the obesity rates? Okay? There is so many issues that you are completely skipping over because you're only being driven by this vaccination nonsense. If you actually cared about black issues, you'd be on the ground like I am every fucking day of the week doing my job. Okay? That doesn't make me a sellout. I've been on the ground and my entire working career has been on the front fucking line for my community, okay? So you need to take a step back. You seriously need to take a step back because you don't have a clue what you're talking about.
A lot of us young ones, we learn by being pulled up. Like, that's how we learn. That's how our culture is. We get pulled up by our elders. And it can be shame. Like, no one likes being pulled up. But you wear that, and then you got this lot being pulled up countless times, and they're not learning from their experiences.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because their equivalent, the closest in their space right now, that a lot of these invariably drifter types, quite isolated, perhaps not part of any community, the closest a lot of them have to an elder or a person they look up to is the top dog figures in the conspiracist movement who aren't educating them per se, they're just pushing them to go harder. So you've got that real division between the manipulators, the top dogs of the movement, and then the manipulated people,
And they can't handle black critique. Like, they that's why they clashed with the embassy eventually, because they couldn't handle the black critique. And as mob, we know black critique is a privilege to receive. I wouldn't waste my energy pulling someone up if I didn't care about them. I'm critiquing you and I'm giving you feedback because I care about you. Now that ship sailed. I don't care about them anymore, and now I'm just mocking them at this point. It's really challenging because mob don't want to fight with mob. Like, we don't want to argue with other black fellas. That's not what we're here to do, and that's not what the Tent Embassy is there to do. And so having to have these arguments with this group of majority of them were white people, but there was still that handful of black faces within that camp that it was really challenging to have to butt heads with, to say, we still have love for you, but this isn't the space for it. And that was really challenging for everybody on the ground, because it meant a lot of us had to really get up to date with our understanding of what it is they're talking about. Because particularly for the older ones, like that older generation, was just not. But then you got the old school ones like Auntie Jen Munro, and like even Gwenda was saying, like recognizing that the OSTF, Mark McMurtry, all that stuff that's underlying a lot of what they was talking about. So we did have like the older ones that did get that side of it. But even like I had to scrape up on my understanding of what they were talking about.
And just as a little reminder, I covered Mark McMurtry, the OSTF, and his sort of somewhat pervasive conspiracist Sovsit reimagination of Indigenous sovereignty in my Sovsits Part 2 video that was called Sovereign Citizens, the Two Sovereignties. So go back and check that out.
Well, Mark, Mark knows us exactly. He was told at the 40th, and why do you think he wasn't here at the 50th? Just like Michael and everyone else, they were all told. Like he was ousted 50 years ago. They were told. I listened to him. It's not my thing. don't try to enforce things. Don't be so toxic about the way they're trying to enforce it and making people, oh, you're this and that if we don't join you. We don't need to join you because we've got a purpose.
Yeah.
Our purpose has always been about sovereignty and land rights.
Now, by the time I had gone to Canberra here, it was late March, so it was the planned second instalment of the Convoy. And by this stage, the plans of the cookers had flourished regarding the Aboriginal Tent Embassy into an outright planned eviction of the embassy. The fucking cheek on them. Gwenda's response to this bullshit was, unsurprisingly, pretty incredible.
She comes in, Jennifer Staffany, someone else in a little crew of gubs and whatever else there was, the cooked ones. And she's trying to serve Murray these papers, and I'm oblivious because I'm over here and I'm like, what the fuck's going on, bruh? I know she's got papers, and I reckon, oh, can I burn them? He said yes, so I just took them and I ran straight over to the fire and I put them in the fire. I never read the papers. And then she gets back up on the stairs and says, oh, you've been served on behalf of Michael Anderson. I'm like, well, you can tell Michael, I hope you went live, that his papers are in the bin, and like he was told before, go away.
Well, fat lot of good that did then, eh? Meanwhile, me being at the budget rally wasn't doing anyone any good whatsoever. Someone gave me a fucking $1 million bill. Someone else gave me a massive UAP printed $1 billion bill too. Yay! Both with Ned Kelly on them. Nice. Honestly, that's about as exciting as it got.
Well, I'm booting off pretty early because it was boring the fucking cunt off me, to be frank. I thought that coming along, my original idea in coming along would be, I thought playing dress-ups and, joining in and getting a chance to, cry freedom would be fun. I've been looking at the cookers for a long time, and a little part of my soul, the wild and anarchic part, thought it might just be fun to put on a cringe defence chic top and scream freedom with the cookers. But it wasn't. And I think it's because I've come too late. I've come at a moment when they're in decline. And so it was a very low energy thing with people just divulging garbage disinfo and everyone else sort of sitting there silent. I'm too late.
Oh, but I did get roped by Leah into doing this TikTok video with her and Roxley, so I suppose that made it all worth it.
Exactly what you think, yes, you want my body and you think I'm sexy.
The best part about my trip to Canberra was my encounters with some of the local legends who've stood up and tried in their own ways to protect various Canberran spaces from the anti-lockdown movement. They are the most exciting part of the convoy and even the movement by far, in my view, and they weren't even part of it. In looking at these fringe spaces, I think we can sometimes get a little bit too focused on them and forget that the best bit along the way is the decent people who try to do something about it all.
There have been voids in the last 2 years of the traditional left not having a place to talk about authority and lockdowns and the very real reasons of anti-vax and Aboriginal communities and also other weird shit like the QAnon, Save the Children narrative, which they're all fucking ranting now, which hyper-triggered all these aunties and uncles who've gone through institutional abuse. And when the leftists saw the narrative coming from the States and went, you're crazy, that's bullshit, don't buy into that, didn't acknowledge the real fucking trauma, made it easy for these people to pray. And they're using a lot of techniques that have been pretty prevalent. And what's our shortcomings, and we've got to get back to these fights and give people alternatives and real fucking fights to get on board and be there to help unpack the ones that have cooked it and have something to hold.
The thing is though, this is something very important here.
Yeah.
This is a spiritual place. This is the most significant place in Australia and in the world. It's the oldest, longest political site. And that's what we're going to maintain until the issues of genocide is addressed in this country.
While you're having a laugh at them, make sure you can have a laugh at yourself in the process. And if you do that, you're going to disperse a lot of the bad feelings that you have about this that are just completely counterproductive. I really think comedy can be weaponized against them, but with our sort of demographic as the audience.
Bruce and his camp were very much a beachhead and a foothold, and they were all talking like they had this space and were going to use it to then launch and then surround the area. Most of the time be very happy to see Australia shame itself in that, but they were using the Tent Embassy to try and do it and try and leave black fellas holding the bag with a black face. Fucking domestic terrorist shit, and that's not anything our movement fucking needs.
Yeah.
Especially when that sovereignty word is already so fucking confusing, and for real life gets real activists on terrorist watch lists, which means when we travel we get fucked up.
Yeah. I asked Gwenda if she had any parting messages for the likes of Mark McMurtry. Do you have any, in closing, do you have any message for them should they decide to come back next time or for the future?
Don't come back. You're not welcome. Full stop. You've been ousted. They're not welcome back. Sorry. No, I'm not sorry. Full stop.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and there's spaces where you can follow all of the people that I've talked to in this video, and I'll put their links in the description. And if you appreciate the work I do on putting together stories like this, then please chuck us a clam on Patreon. It will enable me to do more work and better work like this in the future. Cheers.